समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया.
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले. दिस इज द राइट टाइम.
अब समझा.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Welcome to The Print Uninterrupted. Today I have Dr. Ilya Roubanis, who is a non-resident fellow at the Institute of International Affairs in Athens. He's also an area studies expert on the Caucasus and the Middle East. And he's been a foreign policy analyst for a very long time. And why I'm having him today for The Print Uninterrupted is because he is a specialist and he's been writing a paper on exactly what we are interested in, which is the Turkish military support to Pakistan. Welcome to The Print Uninterrupted, Dr. Ilya. What a pleasure it is. Thank you for taking the time out.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. So, I mean, like we were just discussing that it's interesting we met in Armenia and then we are trying to understand better, frankly, what is the emerging military situation in the Caucasus, etc. But what really got me interested is that you know that India right now is undergoing a bit of unusual situation on our borders with Pakistan, and recently we have launched an operation, a military operation against Pakistani terror camps, which is called Operation Sindoor. And in the midst of that, we also are now studying and trying to understand better what is the level of China's military support to Pakistan, as well as Turkey's military support to Pakistan. But you're an expert and you've been tracking that. So from your perspective, I mean, how would you first begin with what is Pakistan to gain from China and Turkey?
So, the army is often spearheads nation building. I think this is an experience of many post-colonial societies, from Algeria to Turkey to Pakistan, and to some extent, maybe less so actually, India.
Yeah.
And in Pakistan, my understanding of it, because I'm not an expert in your part of the world, in Pakistan, the military complex is really an institutional island driving innovation.
Really? That's interesting. Yeah.
And this has been the case because with Pakistan considering India an adversary that is superior in scale,
Yes.
they need to maintain a qualitative edge.
Okay.
And that puts extra resources, both human and monetary. And the Pakistanis have to do more with less.
Okay.
And that's usually a good recipe for innovation.
Mm-hmm.
The Pakistanis and the Turkish Republic, Turkey, have a, let's say, in some respects, a parallel development, which changes in the middle of the 2000s.
Okay.
So when the Pakistan turns from the American military ecosystem gradually to the Chinese, the two paths diverge. But the Pakistanis acquire competencies that are extremely valuable to Turkey.
So before I just, pick your brains a little bit on that. So I think what we are really trying to understand is that, so what we see is that Turkey is giving drones to Pakistan, but that's not the case. There's much deeper, right?
It is much deeper, and I think it would be an analytical mistake and to see the relationship between Pakistan and Turkey as a case of assistance, because assistance is something a superior is doing to an inferior.
So how would you describe it then?
I think there are complementarities.
Okay.
And there are complementarities in terms of human resources and technological expertise.
So when you say human resources and technological expertise and complementarities, what does a country like Pakistan bring to Turkey?
Right. So, first of all, the Pakistanis have been the pilots of the Gulf and the Middle East for a long time.
Really?
Since
Interesting. Yeah.
So, in the 70s, Pakistan sent pilots. I mean, some of the pilots that fought in the Arab-Israeli wars were Pakistani pilots. And they're still driving. They're not training with their colleagues in the Gulf. They're actually driving the planes for them in certain countries. For example, Qatar. So, for example, one of the reasons that the Greeks were particularly interested in the war over Pakistan and India was the Rafale, because we acquired Rafale.
Yes. You have the Greek Hellenic forces have about 24 Rafales. Yeah.
24 Rafales, and we have there's a partnership with France since the 80s.
Yes.
late
You also have
70s.
Mirages, 24 Mirages,
Exactly.
and then 200 F-16s. Yeah.
And so that was one. But what is often missed is that the Pakistani pilots have Rafales. They know how they work. So let's say, so the basic dog of both the Pakistani Air Force and the Turkish Air Force was the F-16 program. Yeah. Then they gradually went into the Chinese program, which the Turks haven't. Yeah. One of the things that Pakistanis bring to the equation is their ability. They've tested all the platforms. They've tested them both as foes and as drivers. And that's one element of human knowledge. Now, the second thing the Pakistanis have done is, because their relationship with the United States was sort of abruptly interrupted. Yes. They had to learn to upgrade and sustain their fleet by themselves. So they've got the French input. They have the biggest Mirage force outside France. Yes. They have the F-16s, which they have upgraded themselves, sometimes with Turkish support.
Okay.
They've got the Chinese program. So they've become experts not only in working with the frame and upgrading the frame, but also developing interoperability and really creating hybridity in the way the platforms interact. So that is also valuable experience, because you cannot think of many places in the world where this know-how exists. So they bring human resources, are an amazing asset, and the Kaan project in Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, you just
which
help
is
the viewers understand.
A fifth generation.
So the Kaan project is a fifth generation fighter aircraft program, which is being developed by Turkey. And the interesting bit, and why I'm actually doing this interview, is because we were having a discussion, and then Ilya told me that there are about 150 Pakistani engineers that are developing that project.
Yes, and so the Pakistanis are not coming with their hand open, asking. They have something to bring to the table.
It's very, very intriguing for us, because we of course we have our own lens with which to assess the Pakistani military, etc. They are the neighbors. They are also a source of global terrorism in so many ways. But this is interesting, because the assumption is that it's the Turks that are giving it away to Pakistanis because they have a design. But the complementarity bit is something which is new.
And this is expanding in range. So it's easy to focus only on, they're now going into maritime platforms.
But before you come to the maritime platform, let me just spend a little bit more time on the fifth generation Kaan project. Where is it right now?
Well, I'm not privy to Turkish military advances, but we have seen prototypes.
Okay, the prototypes have already come.
But they are not, they don't seem to be very near completion. They don't seem to be, we're talking years, not months.
No, I get that, but it's just surprising and also interesting to note that there is a relationship which is a little symbiotic and not completely, that Turkey is just giving it away to Pakistan.
No,
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
that is not the case, and the partnership is not ideological,
I see.
and also because Pakistan is not a country with unlimited resources, financial resources, and Turkey is not either. Part of the logic of developing platforms is that you export them, and that subsidizes your own program.
So I'll just hold you there, because by that implication, do you also mean to argue that it is not just about the political Islam that Erdogan sort of endorses, even if it's a post-Erdogan era, but the Turkish defense industry has more stable and ties with Pakistan that are going to sustain regardless of whether there is an Erdogan or a post-Erdogan era?
Exactly. So Turkey has a broader industrial base, obviously. And there are every country that has developed a military complex follows a path.
Right.
And nobody does everything. So everybody, hence the discussion on F-16s and the fact that you have to maintain your frames, and then you learn how to bring frames together. So hybridity is one of the things that drive innovation. Another element that drives innovation is your contact with different ecosystems. So Turkey has had partnerships with Korea, which is not an Islamic state, partnership with the United States, partnership with Great Britain. So Spain, they have a special relationship to Spain. So they bring strategic technologies and create their own platforms. Now, they're not top shelf, let's say. You're not a country that is 50 years into developing a complex. But Turkey is sometimes an attractive partner because of the symmetry of the relationship it creates. It comes with getting involved with Turkey comes with fewer foreign policy strings attached.
That's very important. That's a very important point. And before we go further, of course, I'm going to also ask you a little bit about Russia. But before I come there, I'm also, you are a specialist on the Middle Eastern region as well, and you've been tracking one of your papers, in fact, that we've been discussing that you're doing with for IISS, is that you are tracking the entry of Turkish defense industry in the Gulf.
Yes.
And the Gulf is a very important region for us because one of the countries there, which is the United Arab Emirates, is India's foremost strategic partner in the region. And we are entering into a variety of cooperation mechanisms with the UAE. Just help me understand, out of all those players, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Qataris, what is Turkey doing with them?
So, first of all, let me say that India is very important to the Emiratis.
I'm sure, yes.
It's not only one way, and relationships flourish when they are mutually constitutive and complementary.
Yeah.
So the real question here is, what do the Turks bring to the table in the Gulf?
Yes.
So the Gulf is one of the key export regions for arms. And they, particularly the Emiratis, have used this to become a hub for not only procurement, but also for exports. So the biggest military expos are in the Emirates. Yes. And if you understand, to the extent one can understand Emirati diplomatic culture, this is a place where you have an Israeli stand, and next to them the IRGC. I don't think they get in the same room very often.
That's right.
So the Emiratis see themselves as the hosts of the world, essentially. And they don't, if there's one thing that is contrary to the ethos of the Emiratis, is dependence of any kind. And when it came to Yemen, for example, we found that platforms, plurinational corporations between Britain and Germany and France had a few obstacles because the Germans introduced a couple of vetoes for human rights. They introduced the human rights conditionality.
Well, that's a perpetual condition of the West, right? But it's also convenience, right? I mean, we also see that the West drops these conditions when it suits them and doesn't drop it, a lot of times.
And there are ways that German companies have also learned to accommodate that.
Yeah, to circumvent it. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some certain exports happen through German subsidiaries in other countries, for example.
Yeah.
But that's maybe another discussion. But
Yes.
what the reason I'm introducing this element is that Turkey is more reliable in this sense. They won't tell you they won't tell you you can't use your Eurofighter in a war because you buy weapons to fight, and you don't want political conditionality and you enter a war. Certainly not the Emiratis.
No, that's okay. But what exactly are the Turks getting to the Emiratis? I mean, I want to first understand that
So
case by case.
So particularly with the Emirates, they have started from basic procurement, buying stuff, but they have now reached a level of subsystem cooperation. So you have a platform, and let's say the frame is Turkish and the payload is Emirati, for example. So they are not, and what they can do together, they can't do individually.
Right.
So the cooperation is more sophisticated now.
So it's interesting because, of course, we know that America has been the biggest arms supplier in the Middle East as well.
Right.
So if you want to just help also, a lot of the Indian researchers to understand what is the degree of the Turkish involvement in the, say, for example, the Emirati defense industry today vis-a-vis the Americans.
Turkey is not one of the major arms exporters in the world. They're not France or, but they develop in strides. So we are about to see in the next few years an increasing growth of the Turkish arms export industry. They are not, for the moment, competing with the Americans. They cover a different segment of the market. What the Turks bring into the Emirates is battle-tested platforms. And battle-tested platforms that have been tested in different terrains.
For example?
For example, Libya, Karabakh. And again, for example, the Pakistanis have experience in fighting in mountainous terrain. Karabakh happens to be a mountainous terrain. So the human factor is one of the strengths of Pakistan. The Turks have developed avionics to a very good level. They are globally competitive.
Avionics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously they have a drone. They call it drone diplomacy now. It's a whole segment.
We saw a bit of that, of course. We took them down, but then we saw absolutely the length and breadth of their drone diplomacy to Pakistan.
Yes, but you see, the reason the drones are popular is because when they fall, nobody cries. Because they are not a jet fighter platform that costs millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. They are dispensable. Now, if Greece were to lose a Rafale, it would be, 5% of our French fleet. Yeah, it would be a big deal because we have a country maybe the fifth of the size of the Turkish economy.
Yeah.
And scale is a quantity in itself.
Right.
I would have thought that the Indian strategic culture would have counted on scale. So scale would work on the side of India.
Okay.
But the drone system, because it's designed for asymmetrical warfare, was effectively used to balance the strategic asymmetry
Yes.
between India and Pakistan. And I think that's the most interesting lesson, not only for India, actually, for the rest of the world.
I know. I mean, everybody I meet here has been talking about it, and they're talking about how exactly the military, I mean, at the operational level, whatever details they know, how it played out.
And because Turkey was an early learner
Yeah.
of this strategic concept, that is very much rooted in Chinese strategic culture.
I will come to China a little later. Let's just cover the first one.
But
Yes.
they were so valuable as partners to Ukraine, for example.
Yeah.
So if you talk about battle-hardened platforms, Ukraine is another example.
Yes. So, talking about being battle tested in Ukraine, and from there, I mean, there's just one question that we'd like to understand better. Because, we are also, and just bringing in the Russia element here a little bit, is that we know that, the Turkey had also bought the S-400 systems from Russia. But what is intriguing is that they've never deployed. And what do they intend to do with it? And why didn't they deploy them?
Well, they didn't deploy the system because the argument that led Turkey out of the F-35 system is that if you have a ballistic missile system and its radar training in detecting Western platforms, that's a problem because of the interoperability of NATO allies.
Then
It's
why
a
did they
problem-
buy them? I mean, it's logical, right? I mean, Turkey is a NATO member. It is obviously operating its own equipment and all the NATO interoperable, weapons and systems. And then it goes on to buy a very expensive system such as the S-400 and doesn't use it at all. I mean, Turkey is not really. I really want to understand what is the logic behind that. Didn't they think of interoperability earlier, or did they think that they will be able to do it?
So Turkey, so again, I'm not privy to Turkish executive thinking.
No, this is about your reading, of course, as an expert.
But my reading of this is, I mean, there are 3 or 4 ways of looking at this.
Okay.
One is Turkey has a strategy of self-sufficiency, like India. And the idea is that for a long time they have been trying to develop a ballistic missile, a ballistic system that is Turkish. And they have been driving a hard bargain with a lot of suppliers. And a lot of suppliers do not want to share this technology. So they went into a deal with the Chinese, for example, and eventually they negotiated the way out of this deal for a certain price.
Okay.
So when you acquire a system, sometimes you have to look at scale. I mean, they didn't cover Turkey with S-400s. They bought a few systems. Sometimes it's a signal that I am a big country, I have an industry, I make, and be careful, because if you don't supply, others will. So that's one way of looking at it.
Right.
As a bargaining chip.
Okay.
The second way of looking at it is that you sometimes signal your intention to build a strategic relationship with what NATO considers its foremost strategic foe in the European theater.
Yeah.
But Turkey, a bit like the Emiratis, knows that to be the bargaining country, the country where deals are struck, they have to have strong feet on both sides of the shore.
No, that's still the same.
So they get but so they get a system which has a token value, let's say.
Okay.
I do not think that the acquiring the S-400 system was a militarily strategic decision in that sense. I think they were driving a bargain, and I think they overplayed their hand.
Okay.
That's
Interesting.
what I think
Okay.
happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
That at the cost they didn't calculate beforehand. And the only countries that don't make such mistakes are the countries that do not do anything. You know, if you make strategic decisions, you will make a few mistakes around.
Or the other way around, it's only when you do something will you make mistakes. And-
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But what is interesting, so basically your argument is that, I mean, they're well aware of the interoperable, issues with the S-400 and the Western weapons, and from your perspective, it's more about sort of, telling the world and telling the NATO countries and NATO members. Yeah.
So the Turks have turned around and said, well, we're not the only ones who had Russian systems in the EU. Greece had an S-300 system. But NATO said, well, yes, but we're talking about a different kind of radar here. And we're talking about a new generation. And if you get the upgrades, it means that we you are acquiring a system that will undermine our platforms.
I get that. So now, considering the fact that for years Turkey has bought the S-400s and never used them, so maybe they're lying in some of their whatever warehouses.
Yeah.
Our real worry here is that, do you foresee a situation where Turkey could actually, considering the kind of symbiotic relationship they have with Pakistanis, could sell them the S-400s for a cheaper price?
I think it's a matter of priorities. So if you are in Turkey and you want to send your S-400 somewhere, diplomatically, it would be a much better game to send them to Ukraine.
Right. I mean, they send them to Ukraine, it doesn't really affect us so directly, but if they'll end up sending to Pakistan is the possibility that I'm here trying to explore.
Yes, I don't think that is out of the question. One of the questions really is, can the Pakistanis pay for it?
Okay.
And to what extent Turkey wants to undermine its partnership with India, actually, because India everyone wants to have access to India.
But for some reason, the Turks don't. I mean, Turks have come out in unequivocal support for Pakistan, unambiguous support, especially that's what we saw during Operation Sindoor. If there were two countries that came out unequivocally for Pakistan, or China and Turkey. And that's why, and mostly from India, we are always having that lens, for China, that we are always trying to track that very closely. But really, I mean, it's Turkey that probably is a bigger surprise because of all that I learned from you now, which is we should be studying, something that we should be studying.
But Turkey's diplomatic culture compartmentalizes issues.
Okay.
So it's broad generalizations. You can be Turanic, or talking about the Turkic people in Central Asia, post-Ottoman and more political Islam in the Balkans, and more statist, and an example of a modern Muslim majority state in Europe. So you can be different things to different people, and Turkey, because of its history and institutional culture, can do that.
Okay,
So so further down the line, they will find India somewhere. It's not they're not the kinds that put all their eggs in one basket.
I mean, that's why they're so successful being, mediating, and they're also getting a better bargain no matter which side.
Ukraine and Russia
Yes,
in
of course.
different measures and different fields.
Yeah. yeah,
You
of
know,
course, of course.
the grain deal was struck in Istanbul.
Yes, you're right. And okay, now let's very quickly then come to the Chinese now, because of course I obviously wanted your reflections on Turkey first because it's less explored in our side of the world, but of course the Chinese. Now, very quickly, you saw, right, how the Chinese BVR capabilities kind of helped Pakistan, right, do what they did. And you also mentioned that they had a modular input from Turkey. So, how do you sort of explain that a little bit?
So the J17 platform has beyond vision capability and rockets that give it a technological edge from China. It has also some modular input in its guiding, mainly its targeting systems from Turkey. So if you speak to Turks about it, Turkish analysts about it, they will tell you it doesn't really affect NATO because we're not talking about system integration. We're talking about a modular. Yeah, I produce something, you can put it here, you can put it there. It's fine. There are certain elements, though, when you integrate systems, you are teaching people how things work together. And actually, if you think about it, that is the innovative part of what Pakistan does, because they were able to take Swedish, Chinese, Turkish elements and French and make them operate as one. That
And
is
not just operate, I think also optimize.
Yes.
It's not just, it's
Exactly.
also the optimization, that degree. I think that's what we are trying to understand better post the operations in Dur.
I mean, on a strategic level, you can see that Turkey is an active listener of Chinese strategic culture. And Pakistan is a good ear for that.
Symbiotic, of course. And also, I just want, your reflections a little bit on this very interesting thing that you said, is that China, the philosophy there is that it's an arms supplier, but not a security provider.
Yes.
However, you see that in the case of Pakistan, they might emerge also as a security provider, not just an arms supplier.
Yes, Pakistan is close to China.
Yes, of course. They're all-weather ally.
So,
yes.
When you sell a jet fighter platform to Egypt, you get back for your, you get a good generation fighter for a fraction of the cost of a Western platform, which is the J17 has been marketed in similar terms. Iraq was examining the idea of buying the same platform.
Yeah. If I'm not wrong, Egypt has also bought the Chinese jets, the J10s.
I'm talking about, for the moment, I'm talking about the Pakistani platforms with Chinese strategic technology.
Okay.
Uganda.
Okay.
Argentina would have, if Milei
had not come.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So the change, the political change made a difference.
Yeah.
So, and they are looking at the part of the market which says, because increasingly, because we are in a multipolar world and great powers do not have an appetite to be security providers anymore.
Yeah.
United States, Russia wants but can't.
Yes.
United States can but won't. And China sort of says, well, maybe, but not now. But in Pakistan, I think it's a first step for China. It's the first place where you see that the economy, the diplomacy, and the politics and the industrial complex are sort of coming together in a way that can be scary to to India is an immediate issue.
Yeah.
Because it's part of a more complex picture. But if you're sitting in Washington and you sort of say, who's the other superpower? And China brokers a peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and they suddenly become security providers, then that's a different kind of adversarial position, which China has so far said, this globalization, Washington consensus thing you set up, we're in it to win it. It's fine. We're okay. If you want to go out, we still want to play the same game, and we'll just do it in a different platform. But they haven't given up on globalization.
But let me just pull you back.
But and that has implications for security platform, because for military procurement, because unlike any other industry, the defense market is never just about defense.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, that's a
Yeah. So you need to build a level of trust that, when the situation will get hard, I will have reliable supply.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, and just, also just to sort of wrap this discussion in a way that I just want your views on the fact that when the Operation Sindoor happened, and when we saw the Chinese giving this military sort of help to Pakistan and support to Pakistan in terms of optimizing the BVR capabilities, particularly with the PL-15 missiles, etc. So the thing is that, we said that this is the first time that Chinese weapons are getting battle tested against India.
Yeah.
But you also, I remember, you were saying that Chinese weapons are also getting battle tested elsewhere. So just help us understand where and to what degree.
Well, battle tested, I'm not entirely sure, but they are entering other markets. And, the thing is that if you focus on platforms, you lose the systems. And it's Chinese systems that are entering gradually. Not Egypt obviously has a full platform, but systems, you might start seeing them being integrated into the Gulf. You might start seeing them, because the Gulf doesn't have the qualms about polarities that NATO member states have.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And also, if you just for the benefit of the audience, because of course you coming from a very technical sort of background, but could you also help the audiences understand the basic difference when you say systems versus platforms? Yeah.
So a platform is let's say your F-16.
Yeah.
And then it's a bit like, I hate the analogy, but it's a bit like you have a video game and you have upgrades, a video console and you have upgrades. So systems are the rockets you will use, the casque the pilot wears that gives him gives her or her an understanding of their surroundings, the guidance systems for the missiles, the radar systems. So the Chinese do not always sell a platform, but they sell a lot of systems. And you can get your systems not only battle hardened, actually, and also tested. Okay. And and because it's not just a market. It's you want your systems to be tested against real foes, yes. Because that's what you're marketing. That's your portfolio. It's like a bit like a journalist. When you go to a newspaper, you sell your stories. You sell your portfolio. Mm-hmm. Actually, systems and arms, they don't sell how cool they look. They say, we've been tested there.
Yeah, that's right. And also, I think not many people realize that the Chinese and the Pakistanis have already sold jointly made jets to Azerbaijan against Armenia.
Yes.
And we are sitting in this part of the world, and there's a very livid discussion on this, isn't it?
The J-70s were actually sold after the war with Armenia.
Yeah, this is like after 2020.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
but because I mean, Azerbaijan is going to be part of the Kaan project. They are getting into the platform.
So
but
Azerbaijan
they
is-
need to fill
Yeah.
that gap between the Kaan project being delivered and what they're flying now.
Okay. So it's interesting, right? I mean, you know, the Kaan project, which is the 5th generation Turkish aircraft, it is already having the Pakistani engineers working on it, and you're saying about 150, which is quite a number.
Yes,
I mean, you know,
and
and then you also have the Azerbaijanis here. It's
And
it's
I'm sure
interesting.
Qatar will get into it.
Okay.
Well, they've said as much.
Okay.
And the more this is tested, and depending on how perform, it will find itself in the market.
No wonder, I mean, for Armenia, then India is such an important and reliable, you know, defense supplier. But on that note, you know, I'll have to conclude the discussion, and thank you for taking the time out and speaking to me for the Print Uninterrupted. And I wish you all the best, Ilya.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.